Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning, good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And today, we're really going to talk about making yourself as successful as possible and taking the steps that we might need to be taking, especially right now in the middle of this pandemic. Everything that's going on, I'm like, oh my gosh, what's next? I'm voting for Godzilla or aliens. That really is my vote. And so we're going to be talking with someone today who is an expert in this. And so please join me in welcoming Dr. Andy Garrett to our program. Welcome, Dr. Andy.
Hello, Deb. So excited to be here. Thank
Great.
you for letting me join you.
Perfect. Well, let me tell people just a little bit about you. So a licensed psychologist and life coach, Dr. Andy Garrett has invested decades of his life into understanding and codifying the intuitive spiritual essence of authenticity into an organized, research-backed, defined, and modulated personal growth course called Authentic Growth Blueprint. This digital master course is the byproduct of what Dr. Andy has learned in his 15 years of work in a private practice setting in Newport Beach. The life lessons he received from his grandfather, who's none other than Carl Karcher, a successful entrepreneur and the founder of Carl's Jr.'s household brand. Oh my gosh, love them. And they don't have them here in the South. It's just tragedy. His grandfather taught him what it meant to live with authenticity and how to value relationships in a way that are completely transformative and will create a meaningful legacy, and his deep understanding of the science supporting the benefits of positive psychology, especially as it pertains to the development of character and establishing character-based relationships. Dr. Andy has developed a uniquely powerful, compelling, and practical description of what it really means to be authentic. And then he provides a step-by-step blueprint for how to establish an authentic identity and purpose, and how to develop authentic connection and community. Dr. Andy strives to practice what he teaches with his beautiful, and I've seen pictures of them, and beloved family, and by being an active member and contributor to his local community in Newport Beach, California. So again, Dr. Andy, welcome.
Thank you. I love the way you read that. I'm gonna have to maybe borrow that, the enthusiasm and inflections. It got me excited hearing it.
Perfect.
That's not easy to do.
I love it. Well, let's go back just a little bit. Tell us how it is that you decided and discovered that this is your passion in life.
Yeah. I knew from an early age that I enjoyed deep relationships.
Okay.
Right. Like I think part of it was probably adapting to my childhood, but I got really good at listening and asking questions.
Okay.
And I noticed even in like junior high and high school, a lot of people just naturally opened up to me. Right.
Okay.
They would share things with me that they would often say, I'd never shared this with anyone before. And I think it was easy for me not to judge people. And so people felt safe around me. And so my life certainly took some interesting turns in high school where I kind of was a little rebellious. I had some amazing therapists and coaches that actually helped me kind of work through some of those issues. And so, when I finally did get on the college train. Psychology was an easy choice for me. It's something that was fascinating, something I really wanted to do. And I loved helping people. I loved getting in and really trying to make a difference and changing the way people think and helping them to believe in themselves. The specific authenticity course, I had a business coach about 2 years ago who started asking me about my business model and how I wanted to scale it, and if I was more motivated by success or significance. And that was an interesting question. And as I thought about it, I think I'm motivated by both, but the significance part really is what struck me is wanting to have impact, right? It's really, how could I scale? And the way I was doing my business at that point was really, it's just kind of a one-on-one model, right? I was doing some, coaching at organizations. I was doing some speaking, but mostly doing the one on, selling my time for money.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way to scale that was to continue to raise my prices,
Right.
or to spend more and more hours at the office. And I
Away
already was
from
getting
that beautiful
home.
family. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. I often would get home and my family would be asleep, and that was it was soul crushing.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I started to think about if there was something I had to teach, and there was something that I could really, offer, and then create it maybe at a price point where I could impact more people, and just spread my influence, what was it that I wanted to teach? And so I really started thinking about the people that had the biggest impact on me. One of them, of course, being my grandfather, who really had a huge impact on me. And I started deconstructing, like, why was it that he had such a huge impact on me? What was it about him? And it was him. It was like, the essence of who he was. And I started looking at what I call authentic exemplars, people that have incredible influence, and they have inner harmony, so that they really create holistic success. They are not compartmentalizing as very successful business people, but then, they leave a trail of broken relationships everywhere they go. They're people that have beautiful relationships. They have invested in their family, deep relationships there. And I think it just comes from having a sense of clarity in who you are, the impact you want to have on people. So when I started looking at that and said, all right, because authenticity is a word that definitely gets overused.
Right.
So I think even as a psychologist, I was like, all right, what does this word even mean now? I see it sometimes used in a way that justifies, I think, a fixed mindset, a way that, this is just who I am. And if you don't like it, deal with it.
Oh yeah, we see that all the time. You're not going to change me. This is the way I am.
And I've seen it used in a way that justifies, I think, really inconsiderate and selfish behavior, right? Like, I'm going to be brutally honest, and
this is who I am.
Yep. And I think it's given authenticity kind of a bad name. So I think, I was reluctant to use that name, but the more I thought about who my grandpa was and why he was so impactful to me, and I think thousands of other people, it was really authenticity. So I sat down with about 100 people, family, friends, colleagues, mentors. And I said, all right, let me see if I really can get a good understanding of what authenticity is. So I asked them a set of questions qualitatively. When you are feeling authentic, how would you describe that? What is your authentic self? And I got these answers, and I started to see these patterns emerge, that authenticity was really about who you want to be when you feel most free, right? It was the kind of the best expression of yourself, when you weren't afraid of judgment, you weren't being persuaded by guilt, or, when you really, in an authentic relationship, there was a sense of trust. That word kept coming up. I feel so safe and secure.
Right.
And also I trust myself. Like, I feel really in touch, right, with the best parts of me, my values, things like that. And so I started really looking at, if I was going to teach this, what psychological principles would line up with these descriptions that people are describing that, equals authenticity. And so that was kind of the genesis, or that was how the course came together, as I really deconstructed all those answers that I heard. I deconstructed doing a lot of research and reading on authenticity to try and create a framework of asking questions, because there is no universal sense of authenticity. Like, what authenticity means to you and how that would manifest for you and how it would manifest for me certainly is different. And the idea is not to create a bunch of people that are mimicking Carl Karcher or anybody else. Far from it, right? My grandpa wasn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination. But it's about finding kind of the inner sense of inner clarity of who you are. And I think when you really understand who you are, what's important to you, and you live in alignment with that, you have this almost subtle influence. Like, you don't need to force your opinion on other people. You simply live in alignment with that, and people often want to rise up to be better versions of themselves around you. So I know that was a long answer to your question.
It's perfect. It's perfect. Well, and now more than ever, I think people are struggling with this. And part of it is because we've been thrust home. We're not out and about. We have time to be self-reflective. That's okay. I mean, but initially we had the, golly, we might lose our job. What's going to happen when we go back? We might get sick. I mean, all of those various things. And then unfortunately, we had the race issues that came in. And I think that really started getting people thinking about who they were and what they believed. And then you toss in social media, which is telling us this is the way you have to be. This is the way you have to believe. And if you don't, you're a horrible, awful person. And it's been interesting. Maybe it's, because of, I'm a little more mature, but, I look at it, and a lot of it, I mean, I'm just like, okay, whatever. But it really does make you stop and think about what's going on, even if it's just kind of peripherally thinking, wow, did I ever treat somebody like that? Or, what would happen if I lost my job? My job is my identity. I've been doing it for 3 months, 3 years, 30 years, all these various things. And then again, we're home. We've got all this time to think, even though we're having to be teachers, we're having to, all these various other things that, and you add that in there too, that, many people, your kids are young, but, you still had some teaching, because they were in schools. But, the people who had older kids, they're thinking, oh my gosh, I have to now be their teacher. And so it's caused all sorts of angst. There's got to be a better word, but yeah, I mean, it's a very confusing time for an awful lot of people.
I think angst is a terrific word to describe a lot of what I'm hearing.
Mm-hmm.
In some regards, and I don't say this in hopefully an insensitive way, but being at home with my family, I feel more aligned actually with my family values. So in some regards, while there certainly is a lot of uncertainty and there's a lot of anxiety, even that I'm carrying, I feel happier because I, really feel centered and anchored in those values. But I am aware that there are a lot of people out there that are, quarantined into really bad situations.
Right.
And so I have a lot of empathy.
Or alone. I'm not sure who I feel worse for. Someone who may be in potentially a violent situation, or something like that, or my friends who are single. I mean, it's just the mental health issues can be just as devastating.
Yeah, I certainly am hearing, not a ton within the clients that I have, but I'm hearing stories of, some people really struggling and people, and even worse, the violence issues is certainly things that I'm hearing too. So my heart goes out. This is a tough time.
Right.
And I think, defining identity in this is, I've gotten asked the question a few times I heard people describe that we're in the great pause, right? I don't know if you've heard that term. And maybe it was, can't remember where I heard that from right now, but, and so there really is an opportunity in some regards for, as you said, reflection. So a few people have asked me, in this time, what skills should I be focusing on right now to really enhance, my value so that when this does start to, things start to get back to quote unquote normal, that I'll position myself to really, take off and recover as quickly as possible. And my response as I really thought about that, I think traditionally the idea was to always focus on kind of quote unquote those hard skills, right? Get better as a technician or get better in your professional skills.
Take an online class, read a book, all those. Yeah.
And certainly I am not saying that's not important, but I think now more than ever, focusing on those soft skills, right? Of really working on things like social intelligence, working on things like, I think really discovering your purpose and getting in touch with those values and discovering your identity. I think more that you can establish inner harmony, and then line your life up with the virtues and character strengths and, what intrinsically motivates you. I think that's where you're really going to see that you're able to choose jobs really that bring out the best in you, right? That you're going to develop leadership skills that are going to have great, because I think the days of being incredibly proficient or having great technical skills to be really great at your job, but having really bad people skills where you don't recognize the impact you have on people and you tend to create kind of toxic relationships. I just don't think being great at your job but bad at people skills, I think that's not going to be tolerated so much anymore. I think people are really, kind of speaking up. And so I think it's really, your best bet right now would really, if you can focus on both, then sky's the limit for those individuals. But if you had to choose between the two, I would highly suggest that a lot of smart companies, right, are focusing on character and attitude first, as opposed to looking at people that had the highest test scores, the people who are most proficient, because they recognize that company culture is so essential.
You can teach them how to do Excel, but you can't teach them to be a good person. It
certainly is a much more difficult and the wake of damage that it can cost in the process of trying to get there is can have a huge impact on your business.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I know, one of the things that I'm certainly encouraging is people to take this time to really do some self-reflection, to do some work. I remember reading an article a while back on some of the most impactful and effective leaders out in the world. And they were asked to, like, what was the number one skill that they attributed their leadership prowess or, ability to. And self-awareness was the answer that came up consistently, right? As they really understood who they were, they understood the impact they had on other people. And so I think self-awareness is really critical to, and I've said this before, in a day where people seek efficiency and, people are often looking for ways to do hacks, I think self-awareness is the greatest success and happiness hack.
Right.
I don't believe in shortcuts. I think there's nothing beats hard work and persistence. But if you really want to fast track and be most efficient and really creating happiness in your life and really being successful, the more that you can be self-aware so that you're choosing positions and relationships, right, that really align with who you are and what lights you up, you're just going to find that success and happiness happens with greater consistency, frequency, and intensity.
Right. And it's interesting to be, self-aware and to be yourself. I remember when I, worked in corporate America, and they made you take those tests, right? And I knew what the job was that I was going for, obviously. So that's how I answered the questions. I would sit there and think, okay, I tried to outsmart the test. Now, the really good tests are written so that you can't do that. Right. But yeah, I mean, and you do it in the interviews too, all the time. They want to, I'm teaching people how to do public relations. Well, then I better be outgoing, and friendly. Okay. So that's the way I've got to be in the interview, whether that's who I am or not. And so I think, and it's funny because millennials, everybody's like, ew, millennials. This is kind of where they're excelling in this. They're definitely this is who I am. You take it or leave it. This is who I am, which, we can't scoff at that because that's how they were raised. And I always find that funny when people are like, oh my gosh, it's like, right, well, you guys are the parents. But yeah, they really do. And I love that when they're like, you know what? Or they might say, this job is not what I want. Or, they'll research companies. I love it when they really want to make sure that the values are aligned. Is this a philanthropic based company? Now, there are people who they want to make money. That's their goal. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. That's how, many things get ahead. So that's why they go to work for companies who kind of have that driving type of thing. But it is interesting that now even, people in my generation and are saying, that's not really what I want to do. And I love the great pause that you were saying, because now might be the time to be thinking, you know what? I wasn't a perfect fit there. And I shouldn't say perfect because nothing's ever perfect, but it's like every Monday I thought, I got to go to work. And every Friday at noon, you're going, time to go, time to go, time to go. And so then it's time to sit down and think, why was that? Was it me? Was it the work environment? Was it the people I was working with, the tasks I was doing, all of those things? And the cool thing is, I think when we come out of the pandemic, it's going to be totally different. Most people are not going to go back to be doing the exact same thing they were before, for a variety of reasons. The workplaces will have changed. There's going to be a lot of people who are still going to be working at home, or they're going to be working split shifts, or, big part of this obviously does pertain to kids, because if employers know, our employees still have their kids at home, we have to adapt to that. And so that's where it's going to get interesting, because I think people are really going to put their hands up and say, I do work better from home, or you know what, I didn't like it, I need to come into an office. My husband's like that. He does not like not working, and whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, I mean, that's all part of this, but yeah, it's 6 months from now, I think, is about when things hopefully will start calming down, shaking down, and we'll start seeing how a lot of this has kind of come to fruition.
I agree. I mean, I think there are going to be some things that are just kind of permanently, maybe permanent is the wrong word, but are going to be changed, you know. And a lot of times when I work with clients and maybe they're looking to make a transition in jobs, or they're just launching out of college or something like that, and they're trying to find, you know, I often encourage them, not often, I always encourage them, is to start the job search by defining their ideal quality of life, right? So, you know, what, again, kind of going back to some of those values, but if you were to think about, I had someone, there's a friend of mine who was just helping his son who was looking for his first job, you know, just kind of get an idea of what he should be looking for. And I know him very well, and he values his freedom and independence. That's, you know, he is unrelenting and uncompromising in those values. And so he took his first job, even despite some of the things I had suggested, with a company that really didn't provide much freedom or independence. It had a very traditional, you know, kind of schedule. And that's nothing wrong with that. It just was a really bad fit for him. They wanted them there at 9 a.m. and 5 p.m., you know, and there wasn't really any, you know, leeway in that. And so he wanted to say, you know, here in Newport Beach, if there was, you know, great surf in the morning, why does it matter if I want to catch some waves?
If I get my work done.
Yeah. And I said, I get that, but you're fighting against, you know, kind of the structure of this company. It's just not a good fit. And ultimately, you know, that did bear out. And he ended up, you know, not so much following my advice, but just following his values, I shall say, and, you know, looking at that self-awareness. And he has a job now that provides him tremendous freedom. And he's able to go and and surprisingly enough, while he always would complain about showing up at 9 a.m., you know, for this previous job, when it comes to being able to do things on his own terms, he wakes up at like 5 a.m. Right? So when it's on his terms, he has no problem waking up early, putting in the work. But I think when you don't have that inner harmony, that self-awareness, you're often fighting against yourself, right? It's like, you may not understand, why do I keep doing these self-defeating patterns or behaviors? You know, and I think when you really understand what motivates you and, you know, what lights you up, what's important to you, a lot of times you remove that kind of inner resistance and you're able to go with the flow instead of against the flow.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. I worked with somebody like that one time, except it was the opposite. We worked for an agency, and an advertising agency, where you never knew from, you know, 1 minute to the next what was going to happen. We had a variety of clients. You can imagine, I thought it was the greatest thing in the world. I love just going here to there, to here, there, to here, there, you know, whatever. And this woman who worked there, that was the worst thing in the world to her. She wanted the structure. She wanted to know that at 9:10 she would be doing X. And, you know, and so she lasted a while because she did the logistics, which, you know, we did need somebody who was, you know, into structure to do things like that for us, but it was just really too much. And she went to work for a telephone company, which, I mean, it was very structured, and she just, that was the greatest thing in the world for her. You know, and so, you know, what I like is that, you know, there's a lot of opportunity out there for people to find what works for us. And then, of course, you know, you have all these little entrepreneurs and small business owners who just do it on their own. You know, but that's where it's tricky too, because they all think this is what it's going to be like to be an entrepreneur, to own my own business. And usually it's pretty far from that. You know, there's, you know, you don't realize, oh my gosh. I mean, like, I spent half a day today doing invoicing and monthly reports.
Oh yeah.
Do I like that? No. Does it have to be done? Of course. You know, and you know, a lot of business owners, you know, we talk about structure. You know, they think, oh my gosh, I have to work 24/7. One of the things that I learned very early on was to set office hours, to convey those office hours to my clients. And, you know, and I always loved it when they'd say, but you work from home. Yeah. And, you know, and I'm probably going to check an email at 10 o'clock at night or on a Saturday or whatever. But I learned the easy way around this. If they said, we need you to do X, and it was a weekend, it was an evening, it was a holiday, sure, I'd be more than happy to. Here's my holiday rates. which are usually about
Nice.
twice as much. And,
Yeah.
and there are times
Love
where,
it.
yes, there is something that has to be done. But for the most part, they discovered it could wait till Monday. And that was, but that is one of the hard things to do, and setting your own rates. What are you valuing what you do? I mean, all of those
Yeah.
various
Oh
things,
yeah.
that tends to be, that comes back to being authentic to yourself.
Yeah.
One of the things, and I've talked to a lot of women who, and it'll be interesting, who undervalue themselves because we just don't think we should charge them, because we have to be nice. We have
Yeah.
to, we have to, all these things. And I don't want to tell somebody, oh, nah, my hourly rate's $150 an hour. Or same thing with, I have a friend who, she is a negotiations expert, and she
Right.
works with women, and her big thing is working with them when they're negotiating salary,
Yeah.
because
Nice.
women almost always under negotiate. And because we don't want to, there's just a variety of things in our culture, especially, we don't want to be that B word.
Discouraged. Yeah.
And there's several B's that you could put in there, or pushy, and all of these
Yeah.
things. And so it's, yeah, if we're authentic to ourselves, we're going to go, I'm worth that.
That's right. That's right. I love that. I think finding it, and I don't mean to keep hammering this idea of the core values home, but some of the research that's really interesting that, really was enlightening for me as I was putting the course together, doing simple core values affirmations, tends to be correlated with increasing self-worth and self-esteem. Right. And so when you simply just align yourself with saying, these are the things that are important to me, and these are how I want them to show up in my day-to-day life, it really helps to increase. And it also tends to make you self-doubt less. So, I think there are probably there are some great strategies that you could do heading into those negotiations to really bolster that self-worth and recognize, kind of the value that you have going in. And but yeah, I think that's so significant. And I wanted to say, with authenticity, I sometimes pushback that I get related to, again, those notions of how authenticity is almost like weaponized in a way to say that it's, but I tend to get, even on some of the videos and content I create, that I think explains authenticity fairly well, people pushing back saying, that what I'm suggesting is a selfish perspective, on living life or valuing kind of self.
It kind of is, but why is that wrong?
Well, and I agree. And I think, choosing to, I refer to living life inside out. So by first honoring, right, kind of who you are, what's important to you, and really getting in touch with that first. But authenticity, at least in the way that I understand it, does have a clear social responsibility. We recognize we're social creatures, right? And we are committed to bringing, our character strengths and our virtues, to being kind and respectful in these things, in a non-transactional way, right? So I want to be kind and generous and gritty and resilient, right? Because it's, rewarding in itself to do those things. And so now sometimes people bring up, but what if someone's being really disrespectful to me, right? Am I still committed? And I certainly think it is important to set boundaries and to stand up for yourself. But I also am careful not to try and say that, we should be kind in conditional, kind of standards. Yeah. And so I think, sometimes, especially in contentious relationships, it's kind of that sense of, well, I'm not going to be nice, or I'm not going to be forgiving because, I know it's not going to work, or I know that person's not going to do that. And it creates a feedback loop, right? Where they just kind of repeat the cycle over and over again. So I think the only way to get out of that is to create your own standards for what it means for you to be a good person and to treat people the way you want to treat them. But you're doing it because it's your standards. You're not doing it because it's going to get you some reward. You're not doing it because, I think sometimes the example I give on this, maybe it's not the greatest example, but I love to hold the door open for people, right? And I just think it's one of those things that's polite to do. I've done it for a long time. And I understand not everybody appreciates that. Sometimes I get in the trap of holding the door open, and as people are walking through, I find myself looking to see, are they going to say thank you, right? So the whole way through, I'm watching, and if they
are
don't,
they going to acknowledge me?
And I feel irritated if they don't. And even if I do get a thank you, it really, it's like, it was obligatory, right? That's what they're supposed to do.
Right. Thanks.
Now, when I do it because it's my own standard, right? And I just say, hey, I want to hold it open because I just think it's a polite thing to do. And whether someone says thank you or not, I feel the sense of satisfaction of knowing that I was true to myself. Right. And so, as they are walking through, it's amazing. The difference for me is I walk away from that really simple encounter,
Right.
and I feel so much more satisfied. And so, I think intrinsically motivated virtue is one of the most powerful things that we can bring into the world. So choosing to be kind because there's no ulterior motive, right? I'm not looking for payment. I'm not looking, it's just the impact I want to have on someone. We know that, the impact it has on the other person is substantial. And even in a culture, like a family setting. So if I do an act of kindness for my daughter, my son watching that is more inclined to do something kind by simply observing a kind act as well. And so I think, doing a kind act or being virtuous because there's some reward in it is not necessarily bad, but it doesn't have the well-being impact or kind of benefits that it would when you do it, because it's just who you want to be, and it's its own reward.
Right. And it's tricky because we don't want to, at the same point, be taken advantage of.
Yes.
A simple thing would be, holding the door open. 5 minutes later, you're still standing there holding the door open, because everybody, but in business practices, we're like, okay, it now might be a really good example of this. I know that you're struggling financially because everything that's going on. So I'm going to give you a discount of 10%.
Right.
And they go, oh, and you're like, okay, 15%. Well, at 15%, you're losing money, but you were nice to them. You felt better, or and there are the people who will deliberately take advantage. I mean, there's just that, but there are also the people that if you said, you know what, I'm sorry, I just can't do that, or I can only do it for 2 months, or, whatever, they're going to understand because they know what's going on in the world too. So it is difficult because we don't want to be taken advantage of. We don't want to, get pushed too far, but we still have to be true to ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, that's such a great point. So I appreciate bringing that up. I think, and this is a little different than certainly holding the door, where you may not have much control over who's walking in and out of it, but who you do business with. I was having a discussion with someone the other day, and we were talking about, again, their core values and whether or not they were choosing clients that clearly aligned, right, with their core values. And it was interesting because on their corporate page and their business page, they have all their company values listed out. And so I said, well, what are your personal core values? Do they match? And the person said, personal core values. Yeah. And I was like, they had never stopped to even think about core values from a personal standpoint. And so, help them to realign so that they're, I think it's really, really important that you have one set of core values that is operating, for who you are at work and who you are at home. I think in the opposite of that, you are having to compartmentalize, right? I'm this person. You'd referenced earlier, I know I'm jumping a little bit here, but about the idea of your identity being in your work, right?
Right.
And I see that happen a lot in a very negative way, where someone's identity is so wrapped up in what they produce, the income they provide. And so they take that same identity, right? Where maybe they are, an excellent closer, or they're, really good at work. And then they don't know how to switch that off when they get home. And so all of a sudden they're trying to put that same, right? It doesn't work. And they're getting feedback at home that, hey, I need you to be. Yeah,
I'm not your whatever.
And it's tough for them to be able to switch gears and to completely almost shift kind of identities or personalities. And so oftentimes what happens is that they either double down on kind of trying to force their will onto the family, which just creates more division and separation. Or they end up, kind of retreating to work, because it's like at work, I'm being successful, I'm getting all this great feedback. And at home, I'm being told, right, that I'm failing on some regard. And so it's really difficult. And one of the things that I try and encourage for them to do is to say, hey, look, this idea of being a split actor where you're having to compartmentalize, like, I think that's going to be extremely difficult for you to be successful in all areas of life. But if we find that one set of core values that works effectively for you in all areas of life, it simplifies. And it's so much easier then to be able to switch from being on at work and then coming home and being able to bring the full force of your presence into those interactions. But I think in the absence of that, I think it can be extremely difficult.
All right. And what makes it even worse is when we've taken on a false role at work. So maybe you're a manager. And so you think, okay, managers have to be mean. They have to be gruff. They have to, they can't ever ask about, somebody's weekend or whatever. And there are people who are like that. We probably all worked for them. But,
Yep.
if that is not the way you are, that's just, I mean, that's a recipe for disaster. And at some point, something's going to break. And it is
Sure.
hard because you might be expected to be something at work, and that's just not. And so again, maybe that's just not where you're supposed to be, or more importantly, talk to somebody about it. If your manager, go to them and say, this is not me. I can't be this mean person that never socializes with the people I work with. They
Yeah.
might go, well, no, we don't want you to be like that, or, hey, you're such a valued employee. Let's find a different role for you. I mean, there's all sorts of things but it comes back to that, we're scared. We don't want to make waves. We don't want to cause problems. So we're just going to kind of go with the flow.
Yeah. I think the uncertainty certainly that we're feeling now, and I think that can exist in life in general, so much ambiguity and uncertainty, but it tends to really, kind of affect it's the amygdala in the brain. So it's the fear center, right? And the more uncertainty that we feel, it really, the fear center of the brain tends to take over, and it shuts down our ability to like effectively problem solve, right? It shuts down our ability to really be creative. So we do tend to get more rigid in the way that we deal with things. I know we were talking earlier about, I think, a comedy show that you had watched after a stressful event.
Oh yeah, love Lucy. Gotta love Lucy.
And I love that, I mean, there's all kinds of research about, even people that are sick in the hospital and showing them comedy shows, the health benefits that has. And we know that laughing and feeling connected when you're stressed, one of the most important things that you can do is taking time to connect with people that you care about. You get this, neurochemical called oxytocin that gets released, right? And it literally changes how stress affects you. So all of a sudden, when you're stressed and you feel isolated, your blood vessels tend to constrict in your heart, which is not good for your heart over a period of time. But when you're stressed and you feel supported and you are able to laugh and you're able to really feel connected, it actually dilates the blood vessels in your heart. So that's the term full heart comes from that. And so it's really good. And so, just, I think it's so important to make sure, going back to what you're saying, that, we have a support system. We have people we're checking in with, right? We have sounding walls that we trust and feel safe with, right? That we can talk to and kind of say, hey, I'm struggling with this. I'm feeling scared, or, am I off base? My leadership style, right? Are you familiar with the idea of psychological safety and kind of how that works? And
no.
So it's first time I heard of it was, and I can't remember the woman's name who kind of coined the term, but she was doing her dissertation on high performing hospital teams. And so they were looking at communication patterns, and they were surprised to find that the highest performing teams actually had the highest number of errors, or reported errors, I should say. And so they were like, that has to be an anomaly. There's something wrong. So they dug a little deeper into it, and what they found was the highest performing teams had created a culture of psychological safety where everybody's input was really valued and people felt the safety and freedom.
So you might have more errors.
Yeah. And the worst performing teams actually had some of the least number of errors reported, simply because they knew that there would be retribution if they brought up an issue or they said that this was a problem. And so things went unreported, and it just created an overall culture. So it's so important, I think, if you're a business owner or you're in a position to help influence culture, is to make sure that, you're trying to create a culture that supports and emphasizes psychological safety. It may not be fun dealing with some of those reports or hearing that there's problems.
Oh yeah.
But
And there's certainly ways to be able to do things. You bring in an outside consultant. I mean, that's usually one of the things, because you're not going to tell your boss, I'm sorry, Andy, you're a really bad boss. But I might tell somebody else, we just don't click, and things like that. So that might be what happens. We all love the suggestion boxes, and things like that. But, it is, people need to be able to give feedback, and know that it's not going to be ridiculed, scoffed at, all those other various things. We've probably all been in the position where we gave feedback to whoever, to a spouse, to a teacher, to a parent, to a coworker, boss, whatever. And it was, well, that's stupid. Why would we want to do that? You're an idiot. And so then the next time something comes up, you're not going to say anything. Doesn't matter,
Yeah.
and so, and it's hard because as the boss, as the spouse, as the whoever, that's a little chink in your armor, and you don't want them to be saying, hey, there's something wrong. But if it's healthy relationships, personal and business, it can survive that.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. And to me, I think that's what having a healthy sense of identity is so important.
Right.
I think a lot of conflict tends to happen when there is, an insecure identity. And so when you're hearing feedback that's telling you that you're not doing something well, and you start to think, well, is that a criticism of who I am as a person? And it starts to feel like my identity is threatened, right? People will really fight back against that. And so, someone hears that they're selfish or they're mean, right? And their idea of themselves is, certainly very different than that. Instead of listening and hearing and being able to really, have a meaningful conversation where you're able to be persuaded by the other person, right? That I care about this person. I want to hear what they're feeling. And even if my intentions are to be, supportive, clearly the impact is not having the impact that I want. And so maybe I do need to adjust. But when you have an insecure identity, I think it's very difficult to hear those things, right? Your very sense of self feels threatened. So, yeah. So I think,
and it doesn't matter what the role is, you can very easily be threatened. And, and again, that's where it's tricky, because we might know, okay, I'm a great boss, but I really wonder, am I a good friend? Or, things like that.
Yeah, no, I think that's such a great point. And, one of the exercises that I have people go through and going through the Authentic Growth Blueprint, it's called the Best Possible Self. It's actually a fairly well-known positive psychology exercise. I have tweaked it so it fits, the overall theme and some of the principles we're teaching. But it asks you to go through and to define in 3 different roles, the three important roles in your life. For me, husband, dad, and as a business owner, those are the 3 that I've actually written it in 5 roles. But and so it says, this is who I want to be. These are the types of feelings I want to create in other people, right? These are the type of interactions I want to have. These are the values that I want to bring into that. And the neat thing about doing that exercise is it really creates like a mini blueprint for the type of person I want to be as a dad in these different roles. And that exercise is well studied, and it actually tends to create more flow. And so, go into a flow state, because part of the conditions for flow is that it has to be intrinsically motivated. It has to be something that's important to you. You have to get immediate feedback from your environment. And so I've actually shared like my, best possible self as a husband to my wife. And so she has that sheet, and she will certainly hold me accountable sometimes and say, I think you might be out of alignment. And it's fascinating because, those are terms that I have identified as important to me. So when she's giving me feedback, that's saying I'm out of alignment with something that I've I've freely chosen, and I've said it's important to me, I really don't feel defensive. In fact, I actually often appreciate that she alerted me to the fact.
Wait a minute. I think that material things aren't important, but why did I think that new car was so important?
Yeah, that's actually one we're talking about right now.
Well,
Did my wife call you beforehand?
I know she did. She told me. But I think it does come back to, we've got time now, and we are thinking about things like this. One of the coolest things that I have heard frequently coming out of all of this is that people are truly enjoying spending more time with their family. Yes, it's stressful, in many ways. But they're like, wow, I didn't know that my daughter thought this way, or that my son wanted to do this, all those various things. And I love it. We've got a big trail behind our house. And actually it's 100-mile trail. So it's a big trail. But it's a lot of people walk on it. It's paved, it's shady, all these various things. And seeing all the families on it is so much fun. And seeing them getting out. And I'm sure part of it is, we got to get out. We got to get out of this house. We got to get out. And it was funny because for a while it closed down. They said, we, as part of the social distancing, we just don't want you on the trails. And they policed it. They made sure you weren't out there. And so, that was okay. They took it seriously. We were crushed, but yeah, but we all knew, okay, it's going to open, it's going to open, it's going to open. And then whoo, there we all were again. But I think one of the funny things is that I've heard people say is, I like spending time with my kids. And
Yeah.
it was more that they hadn't, like you mentioned, you were working so much before
Yeah.
that you didn't have that opportunity. And now people are like, what? They're nice people. I like them. And I'm sure that the opposite is also happening. I mean, we're one of the things that we keep joking about is, with some of the people I know, is at some point the divorce lawyers are really going to have a good day. But that maybe comes back to the authentic. You realize this was not working, and we can't make it work. Hopefully they might be able to try. And there's that's a whole different thing. But yeah, it comes back to the same thing with your job. This really wasn't what I want to do. Is it going to be perfect? No. That's just not going to happen. But could it be better is maybe the thing. And that's where I think it really is going to be fun, because we can go, I did work better from home, or, not having to see Susie was a good thing, and just, a lot of things like that.
So true. Yeah. Yeah. And hopefully, I think coming out of this, I think it's going to be almost mandated. It's just to give more freedom and autonomy, giving employees choices, and I think, research is really clear that when we have, sometimes we don't want too many choices because that can be overwhelming, but giving them some simple choices, I think makes them feel empowered, makes them feel like you care, and allows them to choose a situation. And when you're happy, as I think I don't think we were live when we were talking about this, but doctors that are primed to laugh before they see a client, a patient, tend to do a much better job of diagnosing and creating treatment plans. Well, the same is true for us in work. When we are happier, we just tend to do better work. And so I think, valuing, again, our well-being, our emotional health, valuing authenticity, being true to ourselves, I think is an important part of not just being happy and content and living your best life, but I think it's also where you're going to do your best work. So yeah, I love it. By 6:30 max, right? When I'm at home, if I'm not finished with my phone calls, my kids are banging on the door, and so like I have to end things at that point. And I can't tell you how great it feels, to have that level of excitement. And my kids are, as you said, young. So I understand that, that they may not do that, in their teens.
Pretty soon they're going to be, Dad, no, go away.
Exactly. So I'm really savoring this time, and really, I had a conversation with a good friend of mine who's a consultant for some really large organizations, and we were talking about the idea of work-life balance, and especially right now with people working at home, the boundaries between work and life are so blurred, and so we were talking about that, and I kind of introduced, I don't know if you heard the term work-life integration. It's kind of a slightly different way to think about it,
right?
Where
because there's no balance. I mean, that just doesn't exist.
Yep. Yeah. And I think work-life, that concept, really kind of saw almost like work and life as these separate entities, right? And I think, ideally you are choosing a job that, is a source of meaning, it's a source of fulfillment, you have relationships, you do things that feel purposeful. And so it really does align with an overall quality of life, right? That you want to create. And so, and then you're also like, I had my kids with me all morning, and that's kind of, the way my wife and I do it is I take on the kids in the morning, and then we kind of switch. And so it's awesome to be able to have that. I so value, that time with them in the morning, and I try and put all the electronics, right? They're all gone and away, and I'm just really present. And so my work and life, right? Like they really do kind of interweave in a way that for me, I think creates an overall quality of life that is really fulfilling.
Right.
So,
and figuring out those boundaries. It's interesting. I've had a couple conversations recently with parents, and we don't have kids, and the cats are like, really, you're still here? But I talked to one who hired someone to basically be her child's companion, because she said, I still had to work. She needed attention. And then I talked with someone else who said, I'm not a good teacher. I know that and she said, and that's not the role I want to be. She said, I want to be mom.
Awesome.
And she said, so we're making sure that we have tutors and people like that. And I know that's kind of watching some of the things that school districts are struggling with, is trying to figure a lot of that out. Because there's just so many issues. And of course it didn't help that this is happening tomorrow. Nobody had a chance to prepare. We didn't have a chance to go, oh, wow, do I have enough Wi-Fi? Do we even have enough computers at home? All of these various things. So that's, that was the first couple months, was just figuring all of that out. But then it was also the mindset. And it's funny, you've got a quote on your website that I love, and it says, the primary cause of unhappiness is never the situation, but your thoughts about it. And I tied that into something that I saw on Facebook, of course, that said, we've got to stop thinking about it as we're stuck at home and rephrase it to we're safe at home.
Yeah.
And it's funny because, now granted, I had the inflection there on purpose, but it really is. Stuck is kind of that word, and we're safe. When you say safe, that just generates a totally different internal feeling. There are times where I'm stuck at home. Oh my God, I need to go to the grocery store. I need to see people. But I also know that it is the safest place to be. And so, so it is, it's how are you thinking about this?
Yeah. It's so critical. It's amazing a perspective shift on something, as you pointed out very well, right? That can completely change the meaning of it, your feelings around it.
Right.
One of the things that, we're doing certainly at home and I've suggested with my clients right now is kind of related to, it's a concept known as a benefit finding exercise, but where, when you are in a situation that's difficult, it's challenging, that's a struggle, is to identify, what do I have control over, right? So the more that you can focus on what we call an inner locus of control, you have the ability to act on that or change on that or to do something. The more you become consumed or overwhelmed or think about things you don't have control over, it tends to shut you down. It tends to, overwhelm you. And so, identify, what do we have control over? What could we possibly learn in this situation, right? Not saying that we want to be in this situation. It's not ideal, but the reality is, this is where everybody's at right now. Right. And so, is there something that we could learn in this that would be beneficial for us? And is there a character strength we could develop in this process? Could we become more resilient, right? Could we become more, could we communicate more effectively as a family? Could we be more generous? And so it gives us a specific outlet to take our energy and be able to make something beneficial come out of this. Right. And then is there some way that I could use this, to benefit others? Can I use it with my clients? Can I help other people through this difficult situation and grow? So it takes this, kind of, potentially negative energy, and it's able to transform it into positive and meaningful growth and purpose. And so, hopefully that's something that is helpful for anyone else listening. But I know it's really helped us to be able to not feel so overwhelmed with so many things that we just have no control over.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And there's a lot, and it's not only that we don't have control over it, it's that kind of nobody does. And so that's where it gets really weird. But it was interesting. I always research and look at people's websites and things before. And so I was looking at your blog, and I have to say, the video with you and Ashley, who's 6, and oh my gosh, she's just the cutest thing in the world. You guys were talking about things that she has learned during this. And my first thought was out of the mouths of babes, because she simplifies it. She's, and that really is with kids. They're not stopping to think, well, if this happens, then that happens, and this happens, and this happens. She's like, what? I learned to be more compassionate. And first of all, I was impressed that a 6-year-old knew what that word was. But she's like, and I love that, one of the things you'd come across somebody who was mean. Yeah. And you were asking her about it, and, what should she do? And she said, I should pray. And I thought, that is just the sweetest thing. And so, but it really is, I think that's it, we as adults really start overthinking, overcomplicating. And maybe we just need to stop and think, okay, do I need to post that on Facebook? Do I need to say that to the person in the store? Do I like that they don't have a mask on? No. Is it my business? Not really. So I don't need to be saying, and I don't need to give them stink eye. What really bothers me about masks is people can't see when I smile. So I really make a point of saying hi, of waving, of doing whatever. If they make eye contact, but it's just, that's what bothers me about masks, is all we're doing is seeing somebody's eyes. And then if you're like me and you've got glasses and things, we're losing that personal connection.
Yeah.
Which is not,
one of the
sometimes they're not seeing me stick my tongue out either. So
good point. One of the things I remember learning from my grandpa, and, especially the last 10 years of his life, he and I were extremely close. So I got a chance to watch him really interact with people in a variety of settings. And he was amazing at remembering people's names. And so, we go to Angels games because that was one of our favorite things to do. And people inevitably start coming up to him. Carl, I don't know if you remember me, but I met you so many years ago, or my dad, worked for you, or something along those lines. And he would always be like, Tim, or whoever their name was, right? And you could see
so they felt so special.
Yeah. It was such a simple thing, right? It was really a simple thing, but he took the time to make sure when he met people that he imprinted upon his brain. He had an 8th grade education, so, he really had a simple sense of like what was important to him. I don't mean to say that
but simple is sometimes
education.
the easiest and the best.
Yep. Yeah. And it taught me the, significance, importance of that personal connection, of how important that is. And I'll never forget that, he had a few-year period of his life where he had so much adversity. My aunt passed away at a young age and was really tragic. He'd, really almost been fired from his own company. He had open heart surgery. And so it was a really challenging time. And I was just pulling through a really difficult season in my life, in large part because of the impact he'd had on me. And so I made sure to write him a gratitude letter, just letting him know who he was. And a lot of what I wrote to him is saying that as I watched him go through all this adversity, that would have, certainly been enough to make many people bitter or upset or angry or things like that. His character never changed, right? If you asked him how he was during that time, he would say, he would say great he'd yell it, I'm great, and so you'd have no idea. And he stuck with all of the routines related to his values, going to church every morning, praying, doing all these things. He was, raising, 12 kids and 50 grandkids.
Wow.
And he still did an amazing job of investing in each relationship, because when he was with you, you felt like you had his whole attention. So all that to say, those are life lessons that I've certainly taken in, and I've made them my own. Like I certainly don't have 12 kids and don't have 50 grandkids. And, but really valuing the significance of each interaction and really doing my best to try and really be present and to listen and to hear and to, hopefully convey to the other person when I'm with them, how grateful I am and how honored I am, to just be talking with them and valuing that interaction. So anyways, that was part of with my daughter, that content piece. She loved doing that. I'm pretty sure if I let her, she would take over all my content.
Oh yeah.
And
you can,
she would do a great job with it.
Yeah, she would. She's clearly not shy at all. But, and very well spoken. I mean, that was, and like I said, she's 6. So you've done good. You and your wife, you've done good.
She's got a psychologist for a dad, and it's certainly, she's got a values vision board, like in her thing, and she can tell you her character strengths and all those things. So
yeah, I want to know who on their vision board put all of this. I'm like, who screwed the world up by putting all of this on their vision board right now?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd like to talk to them as well.
Yeah, take that off. No. But it's funny. I did a vision board for the first time this year, and it's actually hanging on the wall over here. I have to lean back in my chair to see it. But it was very interesting to do that. And I've always kind of gone, oh, how silly, how fluffy. I like it. I do look at it and I think, okay, am I still being true to that? So, that's, everybody, you got time, do vision boards.
It's surprisingly, if the version that I have people do, which is just a values vision. So identify the core values and put stuff on there. And I can't tell you how many people that have done that, who have, especially during, this current season of life, who have said how impactful it's been as a visual reminder each day of what's really important to them and helping them to consistently make decisions that align with that, and how they start funneling, right? Everything, what's not important is really clear. And so they are able to remove stuff that's stressful, that just isn't significant. I call it like being an authentic essentialist, right? So you just keep radically focusing on what really is important and prioritizing that. And not surprising when you do that, the value of your time and life starts to really amplify in ways I think are really cool.
Yeah. And then if something comes along that's kind of an outlier, then you think, okay, should I do it? Do I have to do it? All of those various things. And sometimes you do. I mean, there are just situations that
Yep.
come up where you have to do something. But for the most part, you can go, no, that doesn't align with me. So I'm not going to do it. And I'm
Yeah.
not going to feel guilty about it.
Yes. Yeah. Well said. I think that was a very powerful statement.
Cool.
The
Well,
ability to say no to things is
I know.
so
Oh
so
yeah.
powerful.
Saying no is and that really is one of the hardest things. Is whether it's because you don't want to hurt people, you don't want to all these various things, and and you certainly don't want to tell a client or a customer or somebody no. But yeah, there are definitely times where we need to know how to say no and how to say no. There's sometimes it's no. I've had to tell people, you're not going to touch me. I'm sorry. No hugs. And I do the
Yeah.
hand thing. I'm like, no.
Yep.
But you have to be stern about it. And now if I
Yeah.
giggled and said, no, then they're probably going to hug me
Yeah.
anyway.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, there are definitely times where you might not be saying the word no, but it's in there. So.
Yeah. There's a concept, I'll try and say this really quickly, but of authenticity versus attachment. And these two
Right.
sometimes collide with each
Oh
other,
yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Do I choose to be true to myself,
Mm-hmm.
or do I not want to upset this person, right?
Mm-hmm.
And risk the fact that this
Right.
person might be upset with me
Mm-hmm.
and lose this attachment. And when we choose attachment over authenticity, we get that immediate gratification of feeling like we please
Right.
someone, but
Mm-hmm.
we pay a really big
Mm-hmm.
long-term consequence,
Mm-hmm.
right? Of feeling like we weren't true to ourselves and
Right.
all the impact that comes
Mm-hmm.
from that. And so I think defining what it means to be true to yourself is
Mm-hmm.
so important. So hopefully you can choose that more
Mm-hmm.
often than not.
Right.
And ideally, when you really know what that is, then you can also choose to attach yourself to
Mm-hmm.
people that align with that.
Right.
So that choice doesn't need to come up as
Mm-hmm.
often.
Right. And cut some people loose.
Yeah.
That was one of the things that I discovered when I was ill. Some people, it was time for them to go for whatever reason. But the really weird thing was some of the people who were the most compassionate, most caring, or people I never ever some of them I didn't even knew I existed. So that was very bizarre to see that. And I mean, there were some people that are just gone from my life. They couldn't deal with
Yeah.
it, and it's like, okay, do I feel bad about it? A little bit, but it's not worth getting upset for. And maybe at some point I need to ask them, what happened? But
Yeah.
but not because it's tied into, again, my self-worth, more just out of curiosity than anything. I had one person that said, oh my gosh, I didn't even know you'd been sick. And here I was all angst
Yeah.
that, I hadn't heard from them. They just didn't know.
That is so powerful. That's something I try and do a lot. If I find myself really assuming, right, like this person is upset with me or something like that, I've tried to get better and better at checking in with that person, right? Just saying, hey, look, instead of me, kind of ruminating on this,
Oh yeah, stop
just
telling
want
those stories.
to, it's amazing how powerful it is when you just address it and deal with
Right.
it. And more often than not, the person's like, no, I wasn't even thinking about that, and I put it to rest, put it to bed, and give me that peace of mind and that clarity. And so anyway, I love what you said. I think that is really powerful.
I love it. Well, oh my gosh, Dr. Andy, we are at the top of the hour. In fact, we're a little bit past that, but that's okay. So tell people how they find you and connect with you.
Awesome. Yeah. So my website is ag-thrive.com. So I'd love, there's certainly several ways to get in touch with me there. I know I would also love to offer a free giveaway. It's just a simple video and a little decision-making matrix that helps you to become a confident decision maker in 3 steps. It gives you a framework to make decisions.
We'll have that link in the show notes.
Awesome.
Perfect. I love it. Well, do you have any final thoughts for us?
So grateful to have this conversation with you. So I certainly want to acknowledge that, and
thank you.
Want to encourage people. I really believe that virtue at scale is exactly what the world needs right now. So bringing your kindness, bringing your generosity, bringing your integrity right now, and doing that, on the largest scale possible, is, I think, going to help us heal a lot quicker and get us to a place where, I think we can start feeling safer and start operating as the best versions of ourselves. So
great. I love it. I love it. Well, again, you can find information about Dr. Andy Garrett at ag-thrive.com. I'm Deb Creer. This has been wonderful. We have to do this again. Can't wait to do it again. But until then, everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.